Divorce happens. In fact, it happens to almost 50% of first marriages. So let's talk about it. Welcome to Divorce Happens, a podcast to educate, inspire, support, and yes, make you laugh through divorce and beyond so that you can start fresh on the next phase of your journey. Remember, divorce happens, and then we start fresh.
You get divorced. You get divorced.
Getting divorced?
I'm getting a divorce.
You're getting a divorce.
Because she's getting a divorce.
So what if I get divorced?
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to Divorce Happens, the podcast where we support you before, during, and after divorce with education, inspiration, and a little bit of laughter. Because as you know, divorce happens and then you start fresh. We're here today with Kelly, who I've been following you online, years. And I just admire you so much. And I'm so excited to actually be chatting with you today. So why don't you introduce yourself, Kelly?
Hi, my name's Kelly Sundberg. I am a writer, an editor, a teacher. My first book, Goodbye, Sweet Girl, which was a story about surviving domestic violence and kind of why I stayed in the marriage as long as I did, came out in 2018. And my second book, The Answer is in the Wound, which is about surviving after divorce and after domestic violence, came out in hardcover last year on August 25th, and it comes out in hardcover this year on August 26th. I mean, a paperback this year on August 26th.
Which, first of all, I love the titles of both of your books, and they're just fantastic. So let's go back a little bit here, Kelly. You are a divorced human, as I like to call. And so what were some things that you learned from just the whole shebang of divorce?
Oh my gosh, there's so much. I was thinking about this because, I know your podcast has a kind of forward thinking, positive slant. And part of the reason I didn't leave my ex-husband for so long was because he had me really convinced I was incompetent. And I genuinely believed I wouldn't be able to be a mother on my own, that I wouldn't be able to take care of myself on my own. I ended up with 80% custody, so primary custody of my son. And I was so anxious. And then when I was living on my own and it was just the two of us, I suddenly realized it was actually much easier. I had been so unaware of the load that my ex-husband was creating for me. And, this was like the mid 2000s. We didn't have the same kind of dialogue that we have now about the kind of labor that husbands create for wives.
Yep.
And I just didn't have that awareness. And he was constantly reiterating to me, oh, I do so much for you. I do so much for you. I do so much for you. And I just kind of accepted it. And then when I was on my own, I realized I'd already been carrying and shouldering the burden of the parenting. And in addition to that, I'd been parenting him. So it was so freeing. And honestly, I'm remarried now, but I really loved being a single parent. It was my favorite time to be a parent.
Yeah. I agree with you so much. So I think, one of the reasons I really appreciate your work and your voice is because you were kind of at the forefront of opening this dialogue, right, of the weaponized incompetence, and choosing yourself is not a bad thing, right, in life, and kind of reframing all of that. And I love that you got the opportunity to learn what a powerful mom that you are. I mean, if somebody was listening to this and they're, considering being a single parent, right, and they're in your shoe, they were in your shoes, are in your where you were, what would you say to them? Like, it is really scary, and I had the same fears, right? And I was also like the primary parent, and I just didn't want to be like a single mom. And my therapist was like, "But you already do all these things, right?" So, like, what would you say to that person who's just so afraid of that?
I would say that for me, and of course, I mean, it's going to be different for different situations. I had 80% custody.
Yeah.
The thing that I discovered as a single parent was that I had so much more freedom. Not just the freedom to make decisions about my child, decisions about our life, decisions about where we live, decisions about how clean I kept the house, but also that the time that my son spent with his dad meant I got to go, like I did writers' residencies in Vermont and Belgium and things that I never would have been able to do if I had been married. I didn't have that kind of husband.
Yeah. No, same. I very much understand that. And I think that's hard for people to understand, that you can have more freedom as a single mother.
Yeah, definitely have less freedom in certain ways during your childcare time. And, like I said, there's the freedom and you get to have the agency to make your own choices. But of course, I didn't date for like 5 years after my divorce. I went and got a PhD and I was raising my son by myself. I didn't have the kind of money to hire babysitters just to go out and see if I
Yeah.
was going to have a
Yep.
good time.
Yep.
I didn't have grandparents nearby. So that was really limiting. But then at the same time, I learned how to be alone, which honestly just changed my life. Like I said, I'm remarried now. I could not have found the relationship that I have now if I hadn't figured out how to be alone on my own.
Yeah.
And I also got so close with my son. At my second wedding, my son gave a toast. He's 20 now. He gave a toast and he thanked me for putting him first for all those years.
Mm.
And for not, I didn't introduce him to the man that I married for like 2 years after we
Wow.
started dating. We only saw each other every other weekend when my son would go to his dad's. I know it's very atypical, but it worked for me.
I get it. Listen, I have full custody, so I get it. Like, I don't have an option. I also
Yeah.
haven't dated, and it's been 7 years. And so I appreciate you normalizing this because people often look at me like I'm a weird person for not going out immediately and dating. And I love that because also the right person who he turned out to be will understand, right, your childcare situation.
Yeah, and I had a trauma component too because the marriage was abusive. So the fact that I was forced to take it slowly put me in a better situation because I think we all probably know now rationally that you should enter into relationships slowly.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that it's easy to do. I see a lot of my friends just kind of jumping into relationships really quickly,
I mean, yeah.
even though they know better.
Well, I'm curious if you've had this reaction because I know something that scared me, and I was in an emotionally abusive relationship, and I was codependent, right? And so I was so afraid of walking into that situation again. Is that part of the healing you did by like kind of taking time off? Is preventing that from happening?
It absolutely prevented it to a degree. Honestly, when I started dating my partner, I definitely those codependent impulses reared up in me. But, he was willing to just see me every other weekend. And so I think what that shows is that this was a person who had no interest in codependence. Like we lived together now, we're really good, supportive people. He didn't want me in his life trying to take care of him, trying to improve him. Now, that kind of naturally happens in a relationship and it's happened for both of us. But if I had been codependent, he would have run.
Wow.
And so those codependent impulses that I had, they just had nowhere to go.
Oh, Kelly, you just blew my mind. I love that. I think that's so important. And like, what an important reframe, right? Because again, it goes to like, you took the time to study what you needed and who you were, and the right person came along for that version of Kelly. I love that. So, talk to us about The Answers in the Wound, which I love the title of that book. What is that book about?
So the Answers in the Wound is a linked essay collection. It's also it's a kind of a hybrid essay collection memoir. It's about I kind of say that it's about living with the effects of PTSD, but just as much it's about divorce, it's about single parenting, it's about regaining independence after a period of being controlled. It's about learning how to love again, which was very hard. When I started the book, I started it years ago. And honestly, some of these pieces I wrote when I was still writing my first book and when I was really active in my trauma. So some of the early essays are pretty dark. And I had this thought that I was not going to give this book a redemptive slant, that I didn't want to force some kind of redemption onto it. But by the time I finished the book, which was I guess 2 years ago, I realized that my life really had gotten better, And it would have been inauthentic to try to end it in some kind of dark way. And then I sold the book on a proposal to Roxane Gay at Roxane Gay Books.
Mhm.
And I sent the first kind of finished draft to her. And she came back to me and she said, I think this is great, but I think you need 3 more essays because she knew me a little bit personally. And she said, you need an essay about your relationship with your mom. Which also I've had an incredible amount of healing with my mom since my divorce. My relationship with my mom is the best it's ever been. She said, "I think we need to see your relationship to magic because there's a kind of woo-woo magic component in the book." And she said, "And we need to see where you are now with your son going off to college and getting remarried." And all of those things were just there was just hope in every aspect of them. Even, my mom and I had a hard time when I was a kid, and when I published my first book, people were like, "How's your mom gonna take this?" And I didn't know, and I was kinda willing to take that risk, but she just buckled down, and she started getting therapy, and she started doing her own work, and she really transformed her relationship with me. When I first got divorced, she didn't my family's religious, she did not want me to do it. And so it was a kind of reckoning for us in terms of, values versus quality of life. But
Mm.
she's so happy that I did now.
Yeah. Wow. I love it, Kelly. I'm like I said, it's been such a pleasure, watching you lead the way through this divorce journey. And I know it hasn't been easy, but because of you, people like me felt comfortable and safe speaking up. So I just really appreciate
Thank
the work you've
you.
done. I followed you on Twitter for years and then, social media, and your joy is just irradiates and we all feel it, and it makes me so happy and thrilled for you. I also can't think about my own. I have two sons, like them going off to college. I'm like, ah.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
it's a lot when it happens. But then going, my son, he's home right now. He's actually upstairs. But it's kind of fun to have us one in college too. It's like, oh, I'm like my husband and I are like newlyweds and we have
I
the
love
house to ourselves
that.
and we got a
Yeah.
puppy and
Yeah.
yeah.
I love that. And I think you're so right. Like the relationship you have with your child during that time is unlike anything else because I mean, I was the same. I got separated right before the quarantine. So I have had a lot of alone time with my kids, and we just have a relationship that's unlike anything else. And I'm so excited to see the people that they become. And I know that you are excited for your next journeys. I am curious how you met your husband.
I met him in a bar. I met him the old-fashioned way in a bar. I had a friend, and my son was at his dad's. It was in the summer, so I had some time. My first book had just come out, and I was on a book tour, and I was just feeling really good about myself
I love it.
because I'm not usually that type of person, and I saw my husband. He was there alone. We talk about how it's serendipity too because neither of us really went like, I rarely went to bars, and, he's younger, he's 8 years younger than me, but he would have never it was a Thursday, he was there by himself, like, all these circumstances that never would have
Yeah.
happened, but my friend wanted to go out, and I saw him sitting there, and he just looked really kind, he had really kind eyes, and I said to my friend that I thought he was kind of cute, and she was always sort of a flirtatious person, and she said, "What's your sign?" And he said, "Capricorn." And I'm a Capricorn too. So she was like, "Oh, you should talk to my friend." And he came over and we talked. And then he was, like I said, he was 32 and I was 40 years old. So it
Okay.
was a
What?
pretty significant difference. And I was getting ready I just finished my PhD program. I was getting ready to do a postdoc, but I knew after that I was going to have to move. So we just thought it would be a fling. And then I would leave and we'd never see each other again. But then I ended up getting a tenure track job that was fairly close by, and then he was like, "Well, I could come and see you," and I moved from Athens, Ohio to Columbus, Ohio. It was only an hour and a half, and he was like, "I could come and see you," and we just kept doing what we were doing, and then eventually we realized, like, we we were we were in a relationship. It kinda snuck up on us.
I love it. I remember seeing your post about it, and I think like it just hope. That's the word that I get from everything you do is hope. And we're gonna obviously link your books in the show notes, and just I hope that people read them because coming out of an abusive relationship, you do need to take time to heal, and there is another side to life, but you have to take that time, and Kelly's books really reflect that, and you won't feel alone reading them, which is one reason I love your work so much, Kelly. What's coming up next for you?
Well, I'm working on a novel. I've always written nonfiction, but I feel like I feel like I've said everything that I need to say, at least now in my life. I'm kind of tired of looking inward. I realize I keep talking about this book in hope, but there's also a component about it that's really about rage and anger. And writing about rage and anger for years, that's
It's
tough.
tiring. Yeah.
And so I'm working on a novel that is kind of about single moms trying to date, but I want it to be funny. I have, my divorced friends dating, and they have these stories, and I kind of write little notes down about like the sort of bad mishaps they've had. I didn't have too many mishaps, thank goodness, but that's because I didn't date. But so I have little notes about things that happened, and I want to write a comedy
I love it.
about single mothers.
Ugh, I love it. Let's do it. I'll produce the movie, Kelly. I love it. That's amazing. If somebody is listening to this podcast episode, Kelly, and they're considering divorce, what would you say is some words of encouragement for them?
I mean, I'm afraid to say something like, I have a thing I want to say, but then it's kind of universal. But what I want to say is that if they're considering divorce, it's probably already too late, because I don't think people jump. We have this dialogue in our country that people jump to divorce, that they divorce too easily. I don't know anyone who divorced before they were ready and then regretted it. I mean, at least I know some men who did that, but I don't know any women. Everyone I know who is divorced, and I was the first of my friends to get divorced, but as happens in the last 10 years, a lot of them have gotten divorced too. All of them, it just went on too long. And the longer you let it go on, the harder it is to extricate yourself, like financially
Yeah.
and emotionally and in terms of custody and moving on. So I think if someone's really considering divorce, I think they need to sit with that and and maybe just do it.
Just do it. We're gonna take that slogan. Kelly, you are a delight. I'm so glad we could finally chat. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for all that you're doing for divorced women.
Divorce Happens is produced by Fresh Starts Registry, the only divorce registry platform for everything you need to begin again, including home items, hype team, and everything in between. Remember, divorce happens, and then we start fresh. We're here to support you before, during, and after divorce. Head to freshstartsregistry.com for more info.